It's already sounding like the record. Hello there, girls and boys! Today I'm gonna be sharing with you everything I did while mixing my own version of Man in the Box by Alice in Chains that you could see somewhere on the screen. And if you wanna see the end result of this particular mixing process, you can take a look at that video, first or after this is done. Now let's get into it. The first thing that I realized was that trying to do the reverse engineering that it's part of, well, trying to recreate the sound of a super coveted record wasn't going to be easy, especially because I couldn't find any resource related to the recording process of the track. So everything that you're about to see was done based on my own interpretation of the sound, and I decided to do everything in the box so you could replicate it by your own without the need of hardware. Now, speaking of hardware, let me introduce you to the whole recording process. For the first time ever, I decided to use this Aston microphone that I can't remember the name of, but you should have the name in front of you right now, which is a very good microphone for podcasting and spoken word. Never used it before for tracking vocals seriously, so I decided to take a chance with this guy. Why is that? This is basically speaking a dynamic microphone with the characteristics of a ribbon mic. So it's gonna be great for handling the copious amounts of energy that are part of the sound of the vocals for this song, but also it will give an extra bump in the low end that could be helpful. But more on that later, because to be frank, I wasn't that happy with the behavior of that particular sound with the sound of my voice. So I decided to use a preamp coming from AEA, which it's a very well-crafted preamp designed to be used for and on ribbon microphones. So it's very good at handling low end, and also has this particular high band that is excellent. So in the hardware side, that would be it. From here onwards, let's hit the box itself. So welcome back, girls and boys, to Logic Pro X. In front of us, we got the project that I used to mix this song. Now, I will disclose every single one of the steps that took place during the production cycle, the mixing cycle to be precise, so you can have an idea of what kind of effects and what kind of processing I did to the vocals. So the first thing that we're going to do is isolate the vocals as they are, and also listen to the sound of the recording as it came out of the oven. So here we go. I'm the man in the box. Pretty much okay, right? It sounds like a dark sounding take, dark sounding vocals, but it has personality, which I like, and also it's quite a good starting point for my mixing process. As I stated during the beginning of this video, this is the first time I use this microphone for tracking my vocals, and I gotta tell you that it surprised me. Now, let's analyze the plugins themselves. The first step in this journey was the use of the, of course, gotta be part of the whole ordeal, the fantastic sounding SSL channel strip. And what it's doing is several things. Of course, I am using the equalizer and the compressor that are part of the sound of the SSL stuff, but also I decided to go for the preamp. So when it comes to the EQ, I am using the EQ to clean up some of the kind of dark sounding, the extra rumble coming out of the recording that I didn't like. That's why you see a copious amount of low cut here, but also a hefty attack on the mid-lows and mids as well. Why? Because from here I send the output of my EQ into the compressor, and the compressor I'm just using it to tame some of the extra transients. And of course you can see the expander is engaged, so I can remove some of the breathing in between the takes. Now, I'm going to press play, and I want you to pay attention to the sound of the vocals as well, because the preamp is inserted. First, I'm going to turn it off so you can hear the effects of the channel strip, and then I'm going to bring it back so you can see exactly what I mean by it. Here we go. I'm the man in the box. Raw. Now, with the EQ and the dynamic section inserted. I'm the man in the box. Already sounding great, right? Now, here's the big one. I am introducing the sound of the preamp into the circuit now, because the preamp is adding that grittiness that is super important for this particular song. See what happens once I turn it on. Here we go. I'm the man in the box. It's adding those extra harmonics that are creating this grittiness, but also helping quite a lot in the higher register or the high end of the sound of my take. Pretty much excellent. It's also helping to add this aggressive tone that we're chasing. Now let's take a look at the second installment of my plugin chain. Speaking of aggression, we got the Distressor by Empirical Labs, and this is a digital recreation made by the fine people at Universal Audio. This guy is basically speaking an 1176 in steroids, and I'm using this guy once again just to tame some of the super intense sections of my singing, just to control a little bit more. And remember, we're already doing some compression, a slight compression with the SSL channel strip. Let me take you to the pre-chorus, because that's where you're gonna see the biggest effect of this bad boy in action. Here we go. Wow, you can tell as it is that there is a lot of dynamics going on there. Why? Well, it's part of singing. But by turning on this guy, you'll see how much steadier the whole sound sounds like. Wow, you gone. Badass, right? And once again, I am just barely touching the highest points in volume of my performance to keep it a little bit more steadier sounding. That's the whole point of this compressor. But also, since I know that it has a little bit of grittiness to it, it's adding yet another layer of the renowned genius that we're looking for this sound. Next installment in compression land is the, of course, LA2A. And this fine recreation by the fine people at Universal Audio, once again, it's one of the best. And this guy, believe it or not, you could have got it for free a few months ago. Yeah. So, now, by turning it on, you'll see that the sound of my vocals becomes even more even, but also you get this mid-range push that is super important for vocals. Here we go. Right now it's on. Wow, you coming. Now let me show you this bad boy in context. Excellent. When I did this while mixing, I couldn't stop smiling. It simply worked. And again, this is working because of the understanding of the circuitry behind this kind of compressor. This is an optical compressor, and it is based on the program, the sound that you're feeding the compressor with. So the harder the sound goes, the more compression you get. And of course, the release and the tag are based on the optical circuitry. More on that later. But it's basically just doing that. Now, that would be the end of my compression journey. No, it is not, because let me show you one extra step over here. This is coming in the form of my rear compression circuit, and it's coming from this guy. This is a Purple Audio recreation of the 1176, which is, once again, one of the most important plugins you could ever get, or a hardware unit you could ever get, because it's basically speaking a multi-use compressor. It does everything, and wherever you throw at it, it's gonna accelerate, for real. So this guy is being used, as you can see, to stun. I set it to stun, and it's coming in the form of a parallel mixing auxiliary track. I am sending a copy, as you can tell over here, of my vocal take, as it is pre-fader, so it's not affected by the volume or by my automation passes during my writing, the writing of the vocal, and I'm sending it as it is into this rear channel strip. What I'm doing with it is super compressing the vocal take and pushing it slightly. You can see how little I pushed it in. And what we're gonna do is to help to even out even more the performance. Let me show you. Could you see how far we got with just this amount of extra compression? And the best part, when you do these kind of tricks, your sound doesn't feel compressed at all, because you're just adding what is missing without compressing the signal. Cool. Now, let's go back to the main enchilada. And we're gonna now add, once again, inserting into our vocals the second array of equalizers. And I said equalizers, you'll see why. I am using right now this bad boy here, which is a recreation by Universal Audio of the Pultec, super important equalizer as well. And the whole point of it is that I'm cutting some of the extra fat yet again, because after the compression we got a little bit more of the hunkiness coming out of the mid lows that I not sort of speaking like that much. And also we're getting in the way of the mix. And also enhancing the mid-range, because again, this kind of vocal sound is mid-range focused. So it's important to push the mid-range. And this is how it sounds like. Here we go. Soloing the vocal take.
Save me while you come and save me.
By its own, can give you this kind of artificial sound, but when it comes to dealing with equalizers, I always recommend you to mix those bad boys in context. See how different it sounds like once I bring back the music. First without, and then I'm gonna bring it in. Now it's cutting through, and that's the whole point of an EQ. You use it to scope the sound that you're working on so it fits better with the rest of the context of your mix. Now, when I got to this point, I felt happy, but I wasn't excited at all. Why is that? Because take a look at the high end of the vocals, and you'll see that there is a little bit of not that much clarity. So the way to address it is by applying yet an extra EQ. Introducing the Mag EQ4, and this is once again an analog device recreated through the magic of plugin technology, made by the people at Plugin Alliance. And this is particularly powerful on vocals because of this section over here. This is known as the air band, and as the name implies, it adds air, the sound that is so important and so integral to any vocal take. See what happens once I turn it on. And once again, in context of the mix, I'm gonna go to this section over here so we can get a different take. Here we go. Without and then with.
I'm the man in the box.
With.
I'm the man in the box.
It's simply putting it, it's just adding what was missing in the sound of the vocals. Super cool, because by working with the air band, you're making them cut through the mix better. And you can see that I'm barely applying that air band, but I'm hitting the 10K, because that's where some of that extra sizzleness it's gonna be found. But this guy is not making it feel not dry, but how can I put it? Edgy. You know what I mean? Super cutty, super abrupt. And what it's doing is applying that extra sound, that extra sense of definition that comes with high end, but in a silky fashion. Super good. And once again, you can tell that I had to cut yet another chunk of the 160 hertz because why not? It was there, I did it. Now, that would be the end of the EQs and compressions or compressors used for this take. Let's take a look at the important aspect that is the effects. As I said during the introduction, one of the many things that I realized that are part of the production cycle of this vocal take is the copious amounts of spatial and time-based effects used on the vocals. Spatials are what I would like to call reverbs and devices that allows you to convey the sense of space through artificial methods, such as a reverb. While time-based could be delays. I know that in terminology, using proper terminology, both of them could be considered to be time-based effects. But just for sake of conversation, let's keep it separated so we can analyze them by those terminologies, by those points, okay? First, we're gonna develop the sound, the space on which my vocal take should fit in. The first thing is gonna be by working with this room device, which is coming from the SP 2016 by Eventide. And this is a great sounding reverb. Once again, just soloing the vocals, and I want you to pay attention to how much the release tail of the reverb is actually affecting the sound.
I'm the man in the box.
Super musical, right? Now take a look at it in context.
I'm the man in the box.
It's starting to sound like the record. This is when I got excited and I began to play around with more effects. The second is the whole reverb, and this one is coming out of this bad boy. This is Sound City Studios by Universal Audio. And this is a very complex plugin that could do basically even swapping the sound of your vocal take if you happen to be working in a really crappy sounding room. Is that good, actually, because you can actually remake, but more on that on a particular video for this particular bad boy. But what I'm doing with this is using it as the second mode, which is the reverb mode. And if we go over here, we will have access to the different elements of the channel strip or the chain that it's part of the reamping, because that's what it's basically doing, the IR, impulse response processing that it's applied to the reverb itself. And I'm gonna be working with the chamber, which is beautifully sounding. Let me show you how it sounds like. I'm gonna remove the room and just chamber and vocals.
I'm the man in the box.
Super subtle. And you can tell just by looking at my screen or at my board over here that I pushed the sound of the whole reverb not that much. Why? Because it's way too obnoxiously good. And also because it didn't do what I wanted to do if I push it harder. I'm gonna bring back the room and you will see what I mean.
I'm the man in the box.
Beautiful, right? Both of them are working in tandem. With the room, I am putting my voice inside of a space, and with the chamber, I am creating the sense of depth. Now I'm gonna bring the first big gun. This is coming not in the form of the humble Logic EQ, it's part of the chain. I'm working with my super plate by Sound Toys, but I'm gonna explain first why I inserted the EQ first. As you can tell, I had issues with the mid-lows and mid-lows and lows of the vocal take due to the way it was recorded, but not because it was poorly recorded, simply because I'm working with a stereo track for my karaoke. So I couldn't work with the music as much as I would. So my vocals, being dark already out of the factory, I had to cut some of that stuff. And I applied this before the super plate, because super plate it's also dark sounding, and by adding more and more and more darkness, well, this is not death metal, if you get my super bad joke. This is how it sounds like, just by its own on the vocals.
I'm the man in the box.
This is way more over the top, but it's super musical, and see what happens if I bring back the music and the other two reverbs into the mix.
I'm the man in the box.
It's already sounding like the record, but there is yet an extra element of spice that is missing. There is a little bit of delay on the vocals, and you could hear those during the ending of each of those phrases, the man in the box. And I decided to recreate this bad boy through the use of Echo Boy. And yes, if you're eagle-eyed, you can tell that I even tap tempo the living stuff out of it, so I can make sure that my delays were synchronized. But here's something interesting. The delay is always engaged, but tell me where you can hear it.
I'm the man in the box.
Interesting, right? The delay, even though it's present the entirety of the time, it's not as audible as you might have guessed just by looking at it. And that's happening because through the use of my reverbs, the delay is also mixed in between the sounds of the different stages of reverb, thus adding a bigger sense of space. But also, since it's hitting the stereo field, it's expanding the sound of the vocals and making it fit better with the rest of the mix. And of course, by tap tempo we make sure that it fits within the mix, rhythmically speaking, and also we add that beautiful repetition that takes place in between phrases. Super cool. And pro tip, whenever you're dealing with vocals and delay, make sure to apply a little bit of high cut on the delay sound, because there is nothing more obnoxiously distracting than a super clear sounding phrase being repeated into oblivion. By applying a little bit of high cut, you make sure that your vocals are not as present, when it comes to delay, while still having the effect of the delay being part of the sound. Important. Also, you can tell that I apply a little bit of a low cut, because keep removing the low end. It's always helpful. And there is one final trick that I realized when I was mixing the final chorus. Let me show you. If I go to the final chorus, there is something missing with it. Everything is working, but what it's missing is an extra layer of color to it. And by analyzing the track, I realized that they could have used an H3000 by Eventide. This is the box that you got in front of you. And those are great modulation / delay / basically everything boxes, harkening back to the dark age of technology. And one common trick used, one of the common tricks that pop out by the use of this device was the use of something called micropitch. And micropitch is basically speaking delay / chorus / reverb / many things at the same time, based on the principle of pitch shifting. What does that mean? Easy. Imagine that every time that you send a signal to it, you're gonna switch, or you have two different delay heads, okay? And each of them, it's gonna make a repetition of the sound, but one is gonna go higher in pitch, while the other one is gonna go lower in pitch through time. So if you set it for delay, for example, every single repetition is going to go further and further out of tune as time progresses. And if you set them both to be immediate, you're going to create this kind of quasi-chorus effect. See what happens when I insert it back to the sound of the mix. Without. The effect is only present on the sides, and by doing so, we're making the sound of the vocals feels wider while retaining the mono particularity of it, and also adding grit to it. Much lusher sounding without making it feel fake. Then, you might call it quits, but I didn't, because I realized that there is extra stuff that takes place during that chorus as well. And not only that one, every single chorus. Introducing the final stage of reverb in my mix, coming in the form of FlexVerb by SSL. This is a very powerful yet complex sounding reverb that I will disclose later on a much more dedicated video. But for now, let's think about it as a badass whole reverb, okay? I just inserted this bad boy, but I didn't want to have the effect of it everywhere in my mix. Why? Because I realized that I was happy with everything but the chorus. Why was that? Because in the chorus you got an extra layer of emotion, and by applying an extra layer of reverb during the choruses, we got a much more punchier sounding due to the godlike effect that chorus tends to have, and reverb allows to develop. So here's what I did. I'm gonna mute it, but I'm gonna show you the automation runs that I did on my vocals. You got here the automation, the riding of the vocal take, because as with everything that is highly dynamic in nature, you have to do some riding. Don't try to compress the living stuff out of everything you do because you're lazy. No, do the riding. But that's only on the volume section. Let me show you the verb itself. Look at this. You can see that I only use it during the chorus section of the song, and see what happens now that I brought back the sound of that reverb. It feels even bigger than it was. Why? Well, reverb has this tendency of creating this extra layer of punchiness and grandioseness, if that's even a word. So there you have it, girls and boys. Not gonna lie to you, I was kinda excited when I embarked on this particular project, because this being one of my favorite songs ever, and trying to recreate the sound as close as possible to the recordings without knowing what actually happened during the tracking session was kind of interesting. So these kind of reverse engineering projects could be fun to do it from time to time. So let me know if these help you or if you got inspired by it. And if you want me to do it more often, let me know as well, because it's fun, to be frank with you, and it's also a good exercise on mixing. So with that being said, girls and boys, if you like to support this channel, the best way to do it is by listening to music on Apple Music or Spotify, and also by following us on social media, such as Instagram, because that's the best way for you to get in touch with us in a much more personal basis. Now, girls and boys, as every single time that I meet you, I gotta remind you that you should never let anybody tell you what to dream about, and remember that I will see you when I see you.